So let me just turn to a couple slides. I want to give you my aim. This is me and Mike, Mike Wydrow, who got started on this. We want to identify initiatives that we can pursue collectively. By that, I mean everybody here.
Be a data center.
Somebody's coming in, leaking in with some audio. I don't know. Maybe you should turn your audio off if you got something going on.
It's Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, you got something
Yeah,
going on?
you may have to mute me.
Okay.
Can you mute me? Because I can't mute myself.
I'll consider yourself muted. Okay. So what we want to do is identify some initiatives that are in the election integrity arena that we can collectively pursue and then advocate for and do whatever's necessary, spread the word. But the trouble is they've got to be feasible, they've got to be impactful, and they've got to have a potential likelihood of success. So that eliminates a lot of the things we want to do, understandably. So we may be working around the margins here because we're not going to be changing any law, but we might be able to blocking some of these moronic things that are coming from the Democrats. So just keep that in mind. That's what we're looking for, things that we can actually accomplish. Here's what I propose to do. I propose to go around the table and ask each of you to nominate or offer an issue that you think would meet these criteria of being feasible, impactful, and potentially possible. And then we'll talk about them and identify the ones that seem reasonable for near-term and mid-term action. And then for any that we pursue, we'll follow up with some kind of a plan to break out who's going to do what to who, what's necessary, and actually execute the plan. And then, of course, for any of these, we'll probably need to enlist the help of our like-minded friends and groups to spread the word or take additional action. So who we have here, we have the chairs, election integrity chairs, and/or representatives from citizens group like Elizabeth, who are working the action, but from outside of the Republican Party. What I'm proposing that we do is do collaborative action together on these things. The object is to improve election integrity in the 24 election. And the kind of areas that we might consider, I just listed some here. It's up to you. Whatever you think is issue, we'll discuss it. I show this slide. This was a 2021 report from the UVA Koch Institute. They basically did some surveying and found that basically Democrats and Republicans are equally untrustworthy or untrustful of the election system in Virginia. So that means half the people think this thing is bogus in some form or another. And that's an unacceptable standard, I think, that we've achieved there. So the answer to that is no. People don't have confidence in the system. And I say that because we need help from the governor. Now, Reagan, Rob, I, Tom, Hurt, and others did some analysis on the big picture of election integrity. I'm going to show you a couple slides to help stimulate your thinking. We identified these levels. You got the Department of Elections level, the jurisdictions in the form of the 103, I think it is, election jurisdictions in the state. And then you've got the actual precincts. In Prince William, we have 100 and, how many, Elizabeth? 102, is it, precincts? Anyway, we've got a lot. And if you're in Fairfax, they've got 200 and some. Unbelievable.
266.
266. What a nightmare. So this part of the slide addresses what are the different components of the election system in Virginia. And these overlap. If you were a vice president of the United States, you would probably have a Venn diagram here. But in any case, these are just a way to think about it. And again, I don't do this to constrain things, but to stimulate your thinking. Now, one of the things that we undertook a sort of a one over the world analysis of the election system. And part of the insight that I got out of it is that our franchise, our voting franchise in this republic is basically built on three legs. The first is an informed electorate. The second is the actual election system itself, the hardware, the software, the vote counting, the absentee ballots system, and so forth. A lot of components to that. And then the third one is campaign finance, and that is controlling how money plays in the system. So if you look at each of those, for each of them, they are under attack. For example, I'm just using examples here. In the case of the informed electorate, you recall in 2020, the deep state and the social media folks basically did the whole hoorah about Hunter's laptop was a Russian plant and on, and they covered that up all the way through the election. And of course, now we know that there was 79, 80 FBI agents working just inside Twitter to suppress that story and to basically control what the American people heard or learned about that whole thing. Now, when I send this out, if you click on the other is COVID laws, obviously the laws that were done during the COVID years, which were at best many of them questionable because they didn't really involve the legislature in accordance with the Constitution, but that couldn't be settled. And then I call it the O'Keefe story, and I'm going to click on this just to show you how I've done this. The O'Keefe story. Has everybody here heard the O'Keefe story?
Which one?
This is the one where
FEC data shows that some senior citizens across the U.S.
you
Yeah.
probably can't hear that.
The multiple donations by people. It might be 100 donations or $5 per person, something like that.
Right. Yeah, up to
Right.
20, 30,000. So anyway, go ahead, Beth.
I was saying I didn't think I'd heard of it, but you're talking about like where one name has given thousands of donations here and
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
Exactly. So they're basically scamming the system in order to get millions of dollars laundered through Act Blue and these other progressive systems to get to candidates or to causes that will favor the progressive left. So when I send this to you, if you click on those three red things, you'll get a link to a similar little story to kind of make my point. So I want to tell you about the ones that so far I've come up with 1, 2, 3, 4 issues. And rather than me going into any of them, I'll basically, I propose to give you a little briefing on the first one, since Mike isn't going to be with us. And then I'm going to solicit your input on the others. The first one has to do with something that happened in our county in Prince William. A chief election officer had a 25 vote difference between what the data said on the poll books and what the actual number of folks that were reflected on the machine count. 25 vote. And they could not reconcile it. So he said, we're going to count them. So he basically counted the ballots. And Elizabeth, I'm glad you're on because I can't remember if they counted the ballots and the votes or just the ballots. Do you remember? Oh, I've got you muted. Sorry. Well, now allow you to unmute. So if you can join us back in on the audio, you can tell me. But anyway, to make a long story short, he went ahead and did a count of the ballots, and it caused a bit of a stir. And eventually, Elizabeth and others appealed to both our Republican lawyer and also to the Board of Elections. And in the end, the Board of Elections told the Electoral Board that you need to do a count of the ballots to make sure that they reconcile it. And they did, and so forth. But what happened was they counted the number of ballots. They didn't count the votes on the ballots. So it wasn't really a real reflection of what happened. We certainly didn't determine the intent of the voters. And in the end, they said it was an error on the part of the election officers, where they must have made, although they did it twice or three times, they continuously counted those ballots incorrectly. So it was an unsatisfactory deal. The second one here, I think this is probably the most urgent in my mind of these. It's to ask Youngkin to veto the 15 Democrat bills that eat away at all aspects of election integrity and transparency. The third one, this is Shelley Oberlander's baby. She is trying to convince the Commissioner of Elections to allow batch comparison risk limiting audits in federal elections. If you're familiar with this, the federal election, the batch comparison audit drill only applies to elections within the jurisdiction of the Electoral Board. That very much limits it. For example, in Prince William, we couldn't do the sheriff. We couldn't do many of the the legislative races, and we certainly couldn't do anything like a governor's race or whatever. So it appears to us that the law does not constrain her in this. It seems to us that the law as written now, she could come up with a ruling guidance on how to do that. And that's what we're hoping can happen. The last one that Mike and I added is the idea of asking the Attorney General to investigate non-citizen voting. I think all of you know of John LaRoe. John LaRoe and his EPIC outfit have done analysis on this voting business and have identified, and I include in some of this the link to his research. But basically that he's documented things that look very much like illegal aliens voting in the state. So what we're asking is that the AG investigate this. Take his data and do a law enforcement investigation. So that's just a preview. So what I'd like to do now, if you agree, I'm going to go to Mike's issue. And this one is to allow a chief election officer to do a recount if he is concerned about any disconnects between the results from the machine, the results from the poll book, and or the results of the inventory of the actual ballots. So there's three things that have to line up perfectly: the ballots, the count of the ballots, the number of people that went through the poll book, and what the machine recorded in terms of number of ballots. Now, I'm a chief election officer, and I have had 2 elections under my belt. One of them we were off 1 vote, and the other one we were right on the money, thank the Lord. But we didn't do anything wrong, but we obviously somebody probably dropped walked out with a ballot or something. We never able to figure the first one out. So, but if the election officer wants to do an inventory to satisfy his or her concerns, and also the oath, which I put in down here, that I will studiously endeavor to prevent fraud, deceit, abuse in the conduct of the election, then we think that he or she should have that authority. And not have to ask permission from Susan Beals or even the Electoral Board to do that. You raised your hand, Debbie. What did you?
I was going to say, who are you asking? So you're saying this needs to be done. Who is this being posed to give the authority to the chiefs to be able to achieve this?
Well, that's.
I'm not sure by looking at this.
Yeah, I know.
Who you're talking about.
In all these cases, I've characterized who we think has to make the decision. In this case, it's the Electoral Boards, we think. Now, in our case, the general registrar would say, no, that's not an Electoral Board decision. So it will probably be in argument right off the bat, but it's one that we think is worth investigating. So I propose to just go this far with this one so that we can then get through yours, and then we'll talk about a couple others. And because we don't have time to dig too deep into these things. I'm really looking for feedback on, yeah, that makes sense. We ought to pursue it or not at this point.
Jeff, what happened in this case? Did the election officer get in trouble for, counting the ballots? Or
He was already in trouble. He's somebody that they didn't like. He doesn't put up with a bunch of stuff, and he's been in their face about a number of different things. So he was already an irritant. But no, they didn't do anything to him per se. But he just furthered himself in the whole of the opinion of the general registrar as an electioner. In fact, I don't think they've called him back. He hasn't been called back.
So, yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand, but the reason I'm asking is like with the oath, what else are you going to do? Like if you can't get out of there at the end of the night until you figure things out, seems like a perfectly normal thing to.
Well, that's
to
why
try
I
and
put. Yeah, yeah. I think it's up to the election. That's my point. I think the oath puts the onus on the officers, and we don't need general registrars and Susan Beal second guessing them. And these are the questions Mike asked. He said, basically, should a chief EO verify ballots if there's a discrepancy? If they can, how to obtain legal backing on this? Is there anybody, Lindsay, you may have some advice on this. And then what other strategies can we apply? Here's the deal. We have no way in the state of Virginia of checking that the machines are reflecting the actual intent of the voter. None, except batch comparison audits for those that apply. But in federal elections, that doesn't apply. So we're stuck with a situation where the entire state's going to go down. And oh, by the way, Lindsay knows this. They put a language in one of those bills that said, oh, and by the way, we're not going to allow for the audit of a presidential election. Why not just go ahead and tip your hand? So anyway, enough said on that. What I want to do now is maybe just go around the table here and ask if first, does anybody have an issue that you'd like to offer for everybody's consideration? I'll make notes of it as we go.
Jeff, I think Rodney Wine might have his hand raised.
Okay, Rodney, whip it on us.
Hey, two things, Jeff. On that, the last issue, with the difference on the between the poll book and the scanners here in Frederick County, I've been a chief election officer for a couple of years, and we have the problem. The bizarre law in Virginia says that you're supposed to blindfold an officer of election and randomly shuffle the ballots and pull out the number of ballots to make it equal. That's what the law says. Yeah. But I told my officers of election that was absurd, and I polled them and we took a vote, and we actually just counted the ballots at the end when we pulled them out. We put them face down so nobody could see the ballots, and we just counted them, and it turned out to be correct. It was a one poll worker who didn't check in purposely for whatever reason, and they're no longer a poll worker. But my issue is, and I think we need to work on, is as all voters are required to be a U.S. citizen of Virginia elections, and I think this goes, you already touched on this, is to have each unit pass a resolution requesting an executive order from the governor or enforcement from AG Miyares to enforce proof of citizenship by the Department of Elections.
Okay, so that would be you're saying Republican units resolution.
Yep. Asking for either an executive order from the governor, which is unlikely, or enforcement by AG, the AG's office, requiring the Department of Elections elect to verify citizenship, because under the NDRA it's required, but the Department of Elections and the DMV go back and forth, and it's not done in Virginia. But the AG could enforce, as could the governor.
Yeah, I like that.
And that's going to be a huge problem, I think, with all the influx of illegal immigrants.
Well, the good news is making a resolution from the committees is a possibility. Getting the governor to pay any attention to it is almost an impossibility. But
Correct.
But it is what it is, and it could be another way to put pressure on the governor. What do you think, Lindsay?
Yeah, I like the idea of resolutions. I think that because they happen at the unit level and having an accumulation of them, seems like a good way to get attention, I would say. But I agree that the governor, it seems, really relies on Susan Beals to lead everything in the election space, and she just has not been friendly to our cause. I mean, I think Roxana Gray probably knows that better than anybody I know, that she was able to communicate with the commissioner during the legislative session, and the commissioner just was, like I said, not very friendly, to say the least. I do have some other thoughts, but I think somebody else had their hand raised as well, so I can wait till
Okay.
after that.
Okay. Who else?
Rob, I had my hand raised.
Okay. Hey, Rob.
So one of the things I was thinking about was, we probably all have heard on the news week by week the latest word about machines having been compromised, the ability to break into machines. Just this last week, I was listening to a video talking about the ES&S 200 machines, which we have in Fairfax County. And what it reminded me of was back in 2022, you, Reagan, Tom, and I, having failed to get the attention of the Attorney General's office and Susan Beals, we submitted to the Inspector General 3 complaints, none of which were addressed, to our frustration, but I think at least 2 of which remain very valid. And so the thing that I was wondering about was, should we start trying to soften up our county and our state election board to the nationwide complaints and concerns that are being raised on electronic voting systems? This most recent video that I listened to also talked about the Election Assistance Commission and their failure to properly certify and validate the testing laboratories, among other things. And so it just makes me wonder, at what point will our election officials start to have their own concerns that become public and that need to become public? And so I just found myself wondering, is it worth trying to give a briefing at the county level across a swath of counties, with the intent being to start to create a bit of a ruckus, maybe get some media exposure, and then take it to the state election board? That's my thought.
Well, first let me comment. I think a corollary of that is there's going to be a lot of people messing around with this election anyway, as I think there always is, but in this, none more so than this particular election. And it could be that could cause a failure of some components of the electronic system anyway. If somebody can show that it was been penetrated or that it's been compromised. So that's just sort of another aspect of the point you raised, Rob.
Well, and I mean, my thinking is we need to start a local discussion about these vulnerabilities and about our discontent and uncertainty in the security of our vote.
Yeah.
And where you know, the registrar's office doesn't seem to be the right place to start. So where do you start? County
Yeah.
election board, it seems. But
Yeah.
I'm not so familiar with the county election board and the way they work. But I wanted to toss this out as a potential idea.
Great idea. Thank you. Lindsay, you were thinking of something.
Yeah, I do have several thoughts of things I think that we can do that are productive. One that we've started working on with the Virginia Fair Elections Legislative Working Group is putting together materials to educate lawmakers on these issues, both friendly lawmakers that are senators and delegates. But to your point about the bills that made it to the governor's desk, our legislative working group, and Roxana was a part of this effort. I think Elizabeth Block has joined us as well sometimes, but we put together one-pagers on all of the bills that were going to the governor's desk. And we sent them to the governor and his policy staff and to leadership in the General Assembly, as well as the lieutenant governor and the attorney general, just making everyone aware that these bills were really concerning and that we wanted to make sure they knew what the most important facts were about the bills and why they were bad election policy. And I think that's something that we plan to continue, is just on that path. You know, the legislators, even the ones that do care about election integrity, they just need someone to kind of guide them towards the information and give them, you know, the synopsis when they don't always have the time that we do to research things. So that's one thing that we think is important. Another one that I thought of when somebody else was talking about the going to electoral boards with presentations. We started this a while back and are thinking about picking it up again, and that's basically using that same model to educate about ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is being promoted to electoral boards and local governments by organizations like Fair Vote, and they're very persistent. They work really hard about getting to the local level and convincing local decision makers that ranked choice voting is a positive thing. And I mean, I know there's some differences of opinion on that, but we believe that ranked choice voting is harmful. And so that's something else that we're interested in pursuing, is that education. Virginia Fair Elections also, just in the last little bit, started a working group on non-citizen voting and trying to put a plan together on what we can do to work on that. I'm not as up to speed on how those efforts are going, but we'd love, on all of these things, we'd just really love to collaborate with all of you. And if there's anyone who hasn't been to the Virginia Fair Elections state coalition meetings that we hold online once a week, I'm happy to distribute that information to whoever. And we just love all the work that all of you guys are doing and happy to support and collaborate wherever we can. So those are some of my thoughts. Hopefully I didn't go on too long.
No, and by the way, although I've been missing from those, it's not for a lack of affection. So I really appreciate,
No worries.
I really appreciate what you guys do, and when I have time, I will be there because
Yeah,
it's all interesting.
Oh, for sure. And on the one pagers that I mentioned that our legislative working group put together, and it really was just, you know, I think it was the only way that we were able to accomplish that is because we had everyone working together, and everyone in our working group wrote a one pager or two, and then we just put them all together to be formatted in a uniform way. But I'm happy to share those one pagers with everybody, and we also have a sample letter to send to the governor that includes just a short synopsis of all of the bills that I'm happy to share as well. Just advocating that the governor veto the bad bills that are on his desk or that are related to elections. So there's 11 bills that are still on his desk. He vetoed the 2 bills that would put us back into ERIC, and he sent an amendment back on one of the other bills, but he has 11 left, plus the two budget items. There were two budget items that he needs to veto, and one of those is the one that you mentioned that says we can't have risk limiting audits for the presidential election, which is the whole thing is just ridiculous because that doesn't have anything to do with the budget, but they
Right.
try to sneak it in there. So.
Yeah. Well, you got to give them credit for creativity. Good communists. Uh, now let me. Okay. So one of the things that we're not going to be able, because of time limitation, and I want to be respectful of your time on a Sunday. We're not going to be able to go very far into this, but I want to cruise quickly through the ones that I mentioned and so I can get your feedback on them. And then what I would say is, if you brought the idea up, then I would propose that you be prepared to at least flesh it out to the next level so that we can review it, maybe collectively. We might have to have another meeting like this and make decisions on some of them. But I've got one that I'm going to brief that I think you will all agree that we need to move on it quickly. This is you touched on it. It's the Youngkin veto of the bills Lindsay's talking about. The draft that I got from Shelley had 15 in there, but I understood that a couple of them had fallen on the way. So, Lindsay, with maybe your help, you could help us clean that up and make sure we are contemporaneous with what's going on in the real world. But the idea, this is not a change in the law, but a prevention of bad law. It's going to take Governor Youngkin. And we know what it is. He's got to veto the bills or make the adjustments in the budget so that he can prevent the bad thing from happening. When's the window closed, Lindsay, on the what do you call it, the veto? Is there any more time left for vetoes? You're still muted.
Sorry, I left the page and I couldn't figure out how to get back. Here we are. Yes, so the veto period started when the General Assembly session ended, which was on March 9th, I think, is when it began, and it goes all the way until April 8th is the last day that the governor can take action on any bills. And interestingly, he's been releasing his actions in batches. So he did a batch of vetoes and signings and amendments last week sometime. I think it was towards the beginning of the week, maybe. I don't remember. My days kind of run together, but I think he did like 60 of them. And a lot of the ones in that batch seem to be about public safety. None of our election bills were included in that one. So he may, be kind of slowly releasing batches over the next few weeks. And then after his last day of action, like I said, is April 8th, then the General Assembly will reconvene to approve or reject his amendments on April 17th, I think, is when they're coming back together.
And what does the law say on what's the percentage he has to have to get a rejection? Isn't it 60% or something?
Yeah, I think it's 2/3. So
Okay,
I think so. Yeah.
well, thank God we've got one of the legs of government. Okay, so that tells us when the window for this closes. So what I'm going to do now is basically show you what I have in mind. Where's my thing here? Okay, here it is. So I started an Act for America chapter under the rubric of the America First Caucus. And the America First Caucus is something that Rob Reagan and Tom and I and a number of others have put together to try to make the Republican Party of Virginia more in line with the what we call the America First voters, and also make sure that we elect America First candidates. The obvious one on that is President Trump, who's will be the big kahuna of those elections. But so we started that, but I created this Act for America thing because there's a number of issues we could use it for to promote and advocate for the things we care about. Everybody that's an America First person cares about election integrity. So I've got this thing set up. It's been approved by Act for America, and I'm ready to launch my first campaign. So I'm going to show you what the campaign would look like, if I can. So imagine you send somebody a link with this kind of information in it. It says, please ask Governor Youngkin to veto these anti-election integrity and transparency bills. I've got a little quote from the governor, a little summary of what the issue is. And I expect that we would want to send these to Governor Youngkin, AG Miaras, and the Commissioner Beals. Maybe someone else too. Maybe the senior Republican and Democrat in the House and Senate. And then I summarize what the key offending points are of these. And then if you're online and you open this up, you'll get to this point where you click on the Take Action Now, and it will basically gives you an opportunity to select which of these guys you want to send it to. It'll be defaulted to all of them. And then you hit send, and then you populate it with your name, your address, your that sort of information on who you are. And then, boom, it sends an email to all these guys that you've selected. And then I include here additional information for the voter if they're interested in this. And then I also give them an opportunity to make a phone call to the governor's office as well. So I'm sure we'll change this because it has to go through an editing process. And I'm going to send it to you, Lindsay, especially to see if you can help, make sure that we have the right bills and so forth that still survive. And then after that, there's a link in there. Where is it? Here it is. There's a link which we will save online so that if you want to know more about these bills, you can go here. And this is a summary of all the bills that are objectionable. And I know now I understand why I couldn't find a couple of them, Lindsay, when I was looking for them. So that's, and if what I would propose we do then, once I get this campaign up, I will come back to all of you and I will ask all of you to send this out to all of your peeps that are election integrity peeps, and maybe your Republican committee members and your social media contacts, and try to load the governor up with a bunch of concerned citizens. We're not going to be bad mouthing the governor. We're going to say, hey, we're really concerned about this. We want you to do the right thing, and basically encouraging him to keep doing what he's been doing. So that's to me, this is the most pressing one because we do have that window closing soon. Any questions about that proposal?
Yeah, I agree. Is it going to show up as an email that they're sending or a form? How will it appear to Governor Youngkin?
It'll appear as a America for Action email from you, the citizen. So
right, with their name and address in it or whatever.
Right. So they can check and see you're actually a citizen and so forth. Yeah.
And you're keeping track of who comes to the site and does that, right? So we can start.
Well, I don't know how that works, Beth. It's a good question. I'm assuming that I get some kind of a dashboard or something where I can see what happens, but I haven't had that conversation. I'll know more about this by Tuesday or Wednesday. So I'm assuming I'm successful with Act for America. I will put this together as a campaign. I'll try to get Lindsay's help. I'll give Shelley another shot at it, and then we'll launch this thing. So you'll hear from me one way or the other that this is what it looks like. Okay, I'd like, if you don't mind, I'm going to go quickly to the next one, which is another one from Mike. He wants this kind of related to the point about the other point we made about non-citizens. You all know John LaRoe, his study, his EPIC outfit did an analysis. It's actually John did the analysis of voting, which indicated that there were hundreds of people identified that were likely illegal aliens who had voted. And he documents this as usual in an excellent article on his site. So I refer to that, provide a link back to it. And then basically what we're asking is, and we might be able to do this also through an Act for America campaign, because we're going to be going back asking for the Attorney General to act, right? So it might lend itself to that sort of thing. So in the back of my mind, I see this as a citizens outreach campaign using Act for America as a vehicle to do it. And the beauty of the Act for America thing, after you've done it once, you click once for I want to do it. You click second time for populate the information from what is probably in your cache file, and then you click again to send. Then you can select who you don't want to send it to if you want. So it's basically 3 steps, very simple. There's no need for the voter to change the language at all. In fact, it doesn't allow that. It just goes the way we want it to go. So you don't have to worry about some yahoos telling the governor to go scratch himself. So that's,
Jeff,
yeah.
I just have a question about the vehicle of, like, is there some kind of program or service that you've purchased to be the vehicle to send these messages, or
No.
is it something that you programmed on the back end, or how does that?
No.
Because we're looking into similar opportunities to help citizens advocate as well. So I'm just curious how you've gone about doing it.
Well, as you can imagine, we've all seen a number of these different things. The beauty of this one is it hasn't cost me a dime. I
That's
simply
great.
I have to prove to the outfit that I'm a legit outfit, and that
Let me see.
and they just make sure that we're conservative, God-fearing Americans, and they will make us on their. And if you look, you can go to their site and see they have national campaigns, they have state campaigns, and when you pull it up, I pulled up the one for the state campaigns. I immediately signed about 4 of them right away because they were great ones, to include one I think on voting. So there's already people out there using this, and
Okay, so it's through Act for America. That's what you said, right? Okay,
Act
so
for
they're
America.
providing. Okay, they're providing it. Okay,
When
awesome.
you search for Act for America, the first 20 things you get on them are how they are a racist, Muslim hating organization or something like that. They hate them. The ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center. So you know that they must be doing some good because they've definitely got some bad reviews from the right people. Gabriel, what's her name? Gabriel. Tell me her name. Anyway, when you go there, you'll see a
Brigitte
picture.
Gabriel.
Brigitte Gabriel, yes. I've always liked her. I've always thought she was a dynamo. But I stumbled across this because a friend recommended that we take a look at it. So there you go. But we'll see. If it works, it works. If it doesn't cost us anything. Okay. Okay, I think we've covered all the things I wanted to cover. So let me just go back and quickly let's review these here, the ones that we just populated it with. And can you see that okay? Can you read that? Okay. So what do you keep in mind? Feasible, doable, and something that we can pull off in the time frame required. So How about the chief election officer recount initiative? What do you think on that? Up, down, maybe?
I'm good with that.
Okay. Uh, I just want to get, if anybody thinks it's, basically, if he thinks it's infeasible or a bad idea, just need to hear it. How about the unit resolution to validate voter citizenship? Any objections? Hearing none. Prepare for paper voting emergency crisis or whatever, however we characterize it. How about that one? Rob's special. And the next one, Lindsay, I think you basically already got a lot of the material done, I gather. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, so we have the materials done for the current bills. As far as moving forward and educating lawmakers on just like the continual, the endless problems that we have in our elections, those are definitely things that we'll be creating and synthesizing so that we can effectively communicate them to legislators.
Okay, great. Well, I'm sure, I know that you guys will take input from all of us anytime we offer it. So we'll be glad to offer help.
Thank you.
How about the educate on rank? I guess ranked choice voting is one of the big kahunas and one of the big issues.
Yes. So we just to catch you up with what we have done, we spent quite a bit of time putting together a slide deck that does a really thorough job on educating people about ranked choice voting. And so the materials for that are pretty much ready to go. We just needed people who are willing to go out and, well, one, learn the presentation and then give it to their local electoral board or city council or anything like that. So we could definitely use help on that aspect.
Do you want to send us a link to that, or how do you want us to become acquainted with it?
Yeah, if you just want to reach out to me, and then we could probably do a call with you to kind of go through the presentation and answer any questions about it. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'll do that. I'll be back with you on that. And then once we get it organized, we maybe can provide it to you guys just as a read ahead to see how you want to incorporate it. And I think so. That covers the waterfront. And let me just go back to the ones we touched on. Any of these, the chief election recount, the Youngkin veto, the commissioner to allow batch comparison audit. How do you guys feel about that? Is that a doable one, you think?
I think it's worth trying.
Yeah. The way I look at it, unless I'm wrong, I think the commissioner has the authority to do this because she already did it once when she allowed batch comparison audit last year, right?
So the last I remember talking to Shelley about that, Shelley thought that they needed legislation in order for risk limiting audits, the batch comparison method, to be done outside of a single jurisdiction. That's what I've heard her talk about, but I haven't. Yeah, so I'm not sure if she's.
That's what Beal said.
Okay.
That's what Beal said. They needed legislation.
Yeah. Okay.
She's just passing the buck.
Yeah.
Now, what we can do is we can get a delegate or a senator to go to the AG's office and ask them for a legal opinion. And the AG's office has to respond. So if you don't have one, Delegate Zier would be a good person. But if you have somebody else, use that person because, yeah.
AG's opinions are definitely very, very powerful and effective, I would say. We have had some situations where we've asked for an AG's opinion and they didn't agree with our opinion. So it ended up being a bit of a net loss, I think. So that's just something to be aware of. But getting an AG's opinion on your side, I think, is very effective. Yeah.
And Commissioner Beals hasn't been cooperative so far. She's been very resistant. So I think, we don't have anything to lose by going to the Attorney General on this.
Excellent point, Roxanne. Excellent point. Does anybody have a legislator that they could help us approach? I mean, I can obviously approach the one Republican in the entire Northern Virginia area that is in our Prince William County area. I think he'd be willing. Anybody else have one that you can think of?
Yes, Eric Zaire, who Roxana mentioned, would definitely be a really good candidate. Tim Griffin might also be a good candidate, as well as Otto Waxman. They're all good election integrity champions. Glenn Sturdivant, I'd say, is also a good one for that list. But like I said, unless we know for sure what the AG would say, if he ends up siding against us, then I'm not sure we can recover from that on the issue.
Right.
But I guess at that point we would just need to pass legislation. So maybe that's the way it would go.
Yes, dear Debbie.
Jeff? So as we know, because we've talked about it for years now, our strongest way is to get legislation through. We know that's not happening now. We don't have the power. We're trying to get these vetoes. So we're within a limited creative way to deal with all these issues. I like how Lindsay's and their organization have set everything up. So I think going forward as a group, I'm really big on structure and organization and getting things implemented well. I think we need to decide what are the campaigns. We need a one-page talking point. We need to set up your Act Now campaign, however you want to set that up. And then we need people that will go, like Lindsay was saying, with these different topics. I'm not sure who's.
I'm muted a little. Yeah.
Thanks. So, and then taking these to the units. But if you put your campaign together where you have a one pager, then you put together a request to all the GOPs to put resolutions out on the one we think are actionable.
Yeah.
We put together the campaigns where the information gets sent to the governor and the AG and the lieutenant governor. And then we have people going out raising awareness within the units and within the registrars. Then you have an action across the whole state.
Yeah.
And if it's laid out with directives and the steps and everything organized, you're going to be much more effective in this next election.
Okay, Debbie, because you're my friend, I know I can count on you to look over my shoulder and make sure we do that.
I just think it will work instead of just scattershot that we sort of ask for an opinion over here and we do this over here. And this. But if we get really organized and tight, then you can run anything through as it comes up. And the big thing about this year's, and we know emergency acts is how they operate. They hide things in budgets to be able to operate. So the more organized we are now, the faster we can act moving forward to educate and engage and get people doing something to try to force something. I mean, it would be easier if we had the House and the Senate and the governor and everybody could work together, but we know that hasn't been the case for a long time.
Right. Okay.
Now, Jeff, Jeff, I sent you 2 emails and I just re-forwarded them out to you. I just sent them to you this weekend sometime. But you can forward those out to the group. One was my meeting with Commissioner Beals with Delegate Zaire. And basically the points that we're asking for. The other one was the GOP meeting. I had put a list of priorities together and sent it to as many GOP leaders that I had. I had a list from last year and I know they've turned over, but I forwarded that out. So if you want to share that with the group, that's fine with me. But I kind of wanted to give everybody an update on my meeting with Zaire and Commissioner Beals. We met on February 23rd, and it was Delegate Zaire, Commissioner Beals, and Rachel Lawless. And Rachel Lawless is a political analyst, and she's in a governor-appointed position. And Governor Youngkin left her there. And she is basically apparently kind of Commissioner Beals' right-hand person. She goes to all of the Senate and House chairman P&E meetings that were there.
Yeah.
But basically, she is left wing from my meeting with her. We only had like a half an hour to present the material, but the key things that we were looking for is verification of U.S. citizenship, Each eligible person is only registered once by verifying social security numbers, date of birth, and name, and using the surrender of out of license data. Now, for legal presence codes, because y'all are talking about U.S. citizens, the DMV has a nice spreadsheet. When people come in, they check for legal presence. And that can be just somebody, you know, an illegal coming through and they've got a legal presence document. But once they do that, they allow the citizen they ask the customer if they want to register to vote. And the customer says yes or no.
Yeah.
Now, so there is some checks, but it's not perfect going through the DMV. The DMV also checks that the name, social security number, and date of birth all match. But when you're doing a paper copy, there is no checks of anything like this. And so there's not even a reconciliation of trying to take the paper copies or and matching those with what maybe they have come through the DMV in the past. So what we've asked the commissioner to do is take the whole registered voter list and compare them to the legal presence codes. Find out who is non-citizens or U.S., you know, and non-U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And then basically validate the social security numbers through the DMV system. They do that, but they're not doing a good job as far as when you look at the MOU and stuff like this. They just provide a yes or a no, and then Department of Elect doesn't do any kind of reconciliation. The other one is moving out of state surrender of license. Commissioner Beals did not start using this. It's been in the Code of Virginia. It doesn't say they shall do it. It just says they can do it. And she started it in October of 2023. There's lots of people. If we've identified the 10,000 inactive people, all these people have potentially moved. Out of the 10,000 we identified, over 50% had moved out of state. There's over 450,000 inactive. So there's potentially over 200,000 people that have maybe moved out of state based on just the sample data we did. Plus, actual registered voter list also shows all of these people have moved. A lot of people are active and have moved out of state. So this is the three things we're encouraging her to do. Delegate Zier just finally sent her a follow-up earlier this week through the mail, unfortunately. So it'll take a little while to get a response. He also went through the commissioner of the DMV asking the exact same thing, that, hey, if elect provides you this data, is there any issue providing, you know, if she provides the registered voter list, is there any issue providing her this data? Legal presence codes, no to citizenship, out of state license, driver's license expired, you know, can they help us determine that? And basically what the cost would be and what the turnaround would be. I think he's going to be a lot more cooperative than Commissioner Beals has been.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. The other thing is Erin Joyce, she's a volunteer with Epic, but I had spoke to her this weekend. She does freelance writing, and one of the articles she was doing is the Federalist, and she was doing an article on what's Virginia doing after Eric. So I sent her a whole bunch of documentation for all of this for you as all the backup, and basically said what Virginia isn't doing and hasn't been doing and could have been doing while we were still in Eric. So she's looking at that. So she's been tasked with writing an article on that. The other one was she's going to look at doing system vulnerabilities, including election poll books. I gave her your number, Jeff, and I gave her Daryl Bowe's number to contact for that. The other one is I gave her information on citizenship, basically the legal presence codes, what they're not doing, what they could be doing and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that would be like a third article, or maybe what Eric's not doing and stuff.
Yeah.
The other one I wanted to know is on April 12th, there's the Republican Advance Retreat. Can we get a table set up for like election integrity and go and inform people about what's going on and what they should be doing and stuff?
It's a great idea.
And another one, huh?
Well, I got to say, let me go back a couple steps. You know, as you know, the Republican Committee, Central Committee, voted against Patty Lyman's resolution to completely eliminate ranked choice voting in all forms and all places in the state. And the moderate / establishment type said, no, that might embarrass Youngkin because he got elected that way. So they disapproved that. So they muddied the water in my mind and left the door open. So it would be, I would love to see. Do you guys do that, Lindsay? Do you go to that event and sell your wares?
I know my team has attended in the past. I don't think we have recently. I did talk to somebody about that again, I think just last week probably. And I think the timeline I think it might be too close to the advance to get a table set up this time, but we did talk about trying to do it in the future. But I don't actually know that for certain that it's too late to get a table there. If anyone's interested in looking into it, I think it's just coming up pretty soon, and so we thought
Yeah.
that probably wasn't an option this time. But yeah, we are definitely interested in doing it in the future because I think that is a good idea. I just wanted to say it reminded me when Roxana was talking about Aaron writing for the Federalist. The one thing that, like, the strongest message that our team has heard and other conservative groups have heard from the governor and from leadership in the General Assembly is that the governor is really looking for letters to the editor and op-eds, anything in the public that's really helping defend his ability to veto these bad election bills. That's really key for him. So if
Yeah.
you can write a letter to the editor and get it placed, even in the Richmond Times Dispatch in your any local news, or people that are willing to do that, that is his biggest ask from the conservative community right now, is to get more material in the news that will support the vetoes that he wants to make on these bills.
Yeah,
So some of the other things I would like to do is basically have some money set aside so candidates can do recounts, and basically have a sheet and if they want to do a recount, basically here's what they need to be doing, brief them ahead of time so they're just aware of it, but actually have all the points all laid out for them to show them what actually needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and try to come up for some funding for that. And the other thing I'd like to do is having a complaint source and a resource site for when people do have issues. Elect mentioned they've got a hotline and stuff like this or whatever, which is great, but we need all these people to go there too. But we also need to have a website that they can go to, whether that's going to be our website, if that's going to be John LaRoe's group. He already does something for poll watchers and stuff, but we need to encourage everybody, all the poll watchers, to go to one site so we can capture all the data, election officers and stuff like this. They still go through the official sites, but this is our side site so that we can capture all this data. If people get told that they've already voted, we need to have a site that the citizens can go and log all that information into, so that we can capture all of that, because it's disenfranchising the voters.
Yeah. What do you think? Is that, Elizabeth, is that something John would be interested in doing, you think?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear every nuance, but as far as having one site where everyone goes,
Yeah.
I mean, it's set up. It's already set up the way. It's just a question of the input form.
Yeah.
So a locality can set up their input form according to the way their their machines and so forth, the way they run things in their county. So yeah, it's very feasible. Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah, well, we'll talk to somebody on the board of Epic, maybe. Like you. Okay. So I'm going to make some notes. I really appreciate you taking time, everybody, to think about this and so forth. And I'll come out of this with some kind of the first thing we're going to do is that test that I mentioned of the Act for America thing, to try to persuade, give information to Youngkin. And I think, Lindsay, we can add to that in that missive that please provide a letter to the editor. And, you could basically just pull it right off of the thing that we're sending to the governor. So so that would be something we could do, obviously. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. You have a lovely Sunday. And I will be coming back to you probably with some kind of a report on what I learned from this and what I understand to be the actions going forward. And
Thanks for the
Lindsay,
initiative, Jeff. Great
oh,
job.
well, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you so much. Well, you're all leaders in the fight, and I'm very grateful for having you on, joining us. Now, by the way, this little last ship that I call the Virginia for, what the hell do I call it here? Virginia Election Integrity and Transparency. I made that up. Okay, that is a loose federation of people sitting around this meeting right now. So, and I have a Facebook site page that I use to kind of keep people informed of what's going on from my perspective. So there you go. So you're all members of the Virginia Election Integrity and Transparency. And if you're on Facebook, go get on that damn page. Okay, enough. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thanks. So long.
Yeah,
You bet.
nice to meet y'all.